Hi, I'm Greg Hunter. This is the weekly news wrap up for Friday, October 16th, 2015, the WNW 212. And the war tensions in the war hotspots around the world, namely the South China Sea and the Middle East, I mean all over the Middle East, are increasing. Let's start with Russia in Syria. And Russia continues to punish anything or anyone who is trying to overthrow the Bashar al-Assad regime. They are there to prop up Assad. To them, there are no moderate rebels, there are no good terrorists or bad terrorists. There are just terrorists. It's like good witches and bad witches. I told you last week, just witches. And they're going to kill, seek, and destroy anything. And one day they flew 32 missions, and apparently, reportedly, they are effective. Now, the White House says what's happening in Syria with Russia and Iran. Iran's their partner in the deal. So is Cuba, by the way. I'll tell you more about that in just a second. But they say, that they're doing this out of desperation and weakness. And I'm thinking, desperation and weakness? They're putting on a clinic. Russia counters by saying that the U.S. didn't have an agenda or a strategy. And the real weakling, according to Russia, is the U.S. on the Syrian policy. They like to sit down and talk about a coordinated effort to destroy ISIS, and so far nobody wants to sit down, according to Russia. Now, the U.S. did give up on training these moderate rebels. I've been harping on this for years about the moderate rebels, the so-called moderate rebels, which I've been saying that a big component are Al-Qaeda. They are. They said they weren't going to be training more of these moderate rebels. We appropriated about $500 million, and we spent 41 million of those dollars on training. Less than 6, like the number after 5, 6, about five people. And we're going to give up on that, but boy, we're going to double down on the desperation, and that's the way I see it. The U.S. Airdropped 50 tons of ammunition to the moderate rebels, the Syrian rebels, which is Al-Qaeda. There is a large component of that Al-Qaeda. And think about this, folks. Is there really any difference when you're running from Russian jets and helicopters and Hezbollah and Iranian fighters? Is there really any difference between moderate rebels, Al-Qaeda, and ISIS? Aren't you all three in the same boat? And they're dropping ammunition there. You know that terrorists are going to get the ammunition, at least a big chunk of it. They're all basically fighting for their own survival. And Russia is taking them to town. Now add that, Iran has 1,000 fighters there. Cuba has sent special forces there reportedly to operate Russian tanks. Hezbollah also has fighters there, ground forces there going after ISIS and the moderate rebels and Al-Qaeda. What kind of a foreign policy is this, that we're arming terrorists and doing, panic drops of 50 tons of ammunition and hoping that some moderate rebels will get the ammunition? I mean, come on. Does anybody think that the moderate rebels going to get all this 50 tons of ammunition? Or is Al-Qaeda and ISIS going to be getting this ammunition? And my bet is on Al-Qaeda and ISIS. That's who the Russians are trying to knock out. And I've been saying that the U.S. has not been serious about knocking out ISIS. Not serious at all. One thing's for sure, this is not a winning strategy. It is for Russia. And the people that look desperate and weak is not the Russians and the Iranians. It looks like it is the U.S. Meanwhile, it's reported Iran has about 1,000 troops on the ground helping the Hezbollah fighters. They're trying, it's one terror group trying to knock out another terror group. And I told you about Cuba sending some special forces there. Cuban troops trained in Russia that are going to be have been spotted on the ground in Syria. It's all to help the Russian offensive against ISIS, Al-Qaeda, whoever's trying to knock out Assad. To make matters even worse, now we have the Iranians revealing on their state television that they have these new ballistic missiles and new missile technology. Also, they revealed one of their secret underground bases 650 feet under the ground. Boy, they didn't reveal any of this while we were negotiating that nuclear deal, which was a capitulation. They were supposed to have an embargo against importing arms and having ballistic missiles, and Iran said, we're not going to do any of that. And this is sad. But I said, if you want to know what the deal is, listen to the Iranians. Don't listen to the U.S. Isn't that sad? I can't believe my own government. They said they weren't going to inspect the military facilities. They weren't going to issue the permits. They weren't going to allow that, period, the end. That when the embargo was over, we wanted to do whatever weapons we felt like doing. They're doing that. And when we signed this deal, we get all of our money, not, a slow give back of the $150 billion. We want our money. And that's exactly what is happening. The Iranians have been telling the truth about what the deal was and not the U.S. government. I mean, the whole thing is not a deal, it's a capitulation. And do you think they would be, showing off their intercontinental ballistic missile and ballistic missiles and new missile technology that, according to Ed Royce, he is a congressman and he is the head of the Foreign Affairs Committee. He says some of this new missile technology and ballistic technology is likely going to end up in the hands of Hamas and Hezbollah to attack Israel. Speaking of Israel, violence has broken out in the Jewish state. It's supposedly not an organized attack, but it's an attack organized through social media lone wolves. They're stabbing people, running over people. The Israelis are then coming out and shooting them, and the Israelis have brought up their army, and they're worried about this spinning out of control. That this could turn into a real bloody hostile civil war. It's already very hostile, but this could really spin completely and totally out of control. Of course, the Palestinian Authority says, well, we're not organizing. This is all being organized on social media. That's just some angry people that are acting on their own. Well, that might be, but the Israelis feel extremely threatened by it. And then when you add in the component of this missile technology that the Iranians are flaunting and showing off these deep underground bunkers, this is not really fostering any kind of peace. And incidentally, remember, I had it out with Catherine Austin Fitts and said this is not going to be a peace deal. It's going to foment a wider war at a much faster pace. And what's happening? A wider war at a much faster pace. And we didn't even bring up, what does Saudi Arabia think about the Iranians showing off these new missiles, or Turkey, or any of the other Arab Gulf countries, or the countries in the Middle East that are against the Shia Muslims, and the Sunni Muslims have to be looking at this going, what, this is going crazy. Everybody is arming up. Everybody in the Middle East is arming up, and tensions are rising, and there is no peace. This deal isn't bringing about any peace whatsoever, just a wider war at a much faster pace, exactly as I predicted. Move over to the South China Sea, and tensions are heating up there as well between the U.S. and China. China has built these islands, drudged up all this sand. They created thousands and thousands of acres of places where you could land military aircraft. It's to project their power. It's 1,000 miles away from China, and China says, "Hey, listen, this is our sovereign territory now. This is ours. This is our territory." The U.S. says, no, this is a vital shipping way, and that people ought to be able to pass through. China's saying around every one of these little atolls and islands that we have built up, there's 12 miles of sovereign, water and our space that you can't go through. The U.S. is sending ships there. We say that this threatens the use of the waterways. Japan also says they may be sending patrols to those areas, and this could get out of control in a hurry. China says that it will stand up, it'll fight, it'll put the kibosh on any actions that the U.S. has, and it says that the U.S. has had ceaseless provocations. Now, those are pretty strong words. That the Chinese government is saying, you send your ships over here and you get in our way and we will stand up and we'll take a military action. That's pretty scary with the countries in the arsenals that the U.S. and China have. You sink somebody's ship in international waters or anybody else's waters and, that's an act of war. So the South China Sea is getting very, very dicey. China is claiming the 600-mile area as their own, sovereign territory. It's 1,000 miles from China, and of course, a lot of other countries say that this area is partly theirs as well. But you might remember that Warren Pollock pointed out that China and the South China Sea in war with China. And also Charles Nenner said, that the Japanese and their aerospace industry spiked, and that a big war could happen between China and the U.S. allies and Japan. So this is a real big problem. Charles Nenner, incidentally, is going to talk about war cycles and about the economic cycles. He's a renowned geopolitical and financial analyst, Charles Nenner from the Charles Nenner Research Center. He'll be on in an early Sunday release. He has, some scary stuff to talk about, but more positive stuff to talk about as well. You'll want to tune in and take a look at the Charles Nenner interview. But moving on to the economy. Oh, incidentally, and I wanted to bring this up, and this is something that just stuck in my head over and over again. Gerald Celente says, when the economy goes bad, they take you to war. And boy, it sure looks like we are headed towards war as opposed to headed towards peace. That's for sure. You know that there's something wrong with the economy when Walmart tanks 10% in one day. And their forecast isn't good, at least near term. Later on, it's good, but so they say. But right now, it's not doing well. And you might remember John Williams saying that retail sales, have not been doing good in the first quarter, second quarter. They got a little bump according to this story here. Here's one of the stories. They keep cramming this. Now they're not even calling it a recovery, but they're saying the economy is inching up a little bit. This is in USA Today. Economy inches up. And maybe too slow for the Fed. Now, listen, inside this story in USA Today on Thursday, economy inches up, but maybe too slow. They talk about, workers, and they can't find skilled workers or unskilled workers for that matter, and there's just a shortage of workers. Now think about this. Shortage of workers. 94 million people no longer counted in the workforce, and there's a shortage of unskilled workers? Really? And in this same article, in the last paragraph here, I'll read it to you. It says that the Fed says that in their Beige Book that industry is sluggish. Now, you got a shortage of workers, but yet industry is sluggish according to the Fed. I mean, that's almost nonsensical. I mean, they're saying the economy is good, but really not so much. And I pulled up a few headlines to show you that the economy is really not good. Just this past week, as a matter of fact, just the last few days. And here's one. The latest evidence that global trade has collapsed. India's imports plunged by 25%. This is a big country last I checked. Next up, economic doomsday clock closer to midnight. This is like a research paper from people that manage money, that they send it out to their clients. And here's one of my favorite. Black swan risks rise to highest level ever. Black swan risk rises to highest level ever. Check out that. This is the CNBC, folks. This headline came from CNBC. We're talking about the black swan risk rises to highest level ever. The day this came out, before it came out, my friend Gregory Manarino told me about the exact same thing, saying this is crazy. It's off the charts. I mean, he says, but usually you don't have a problem when it goes up and peaks like it is now. He says you have a problem when it starts coming down. So we might have a problem, as this thing kind of comes down, this black swan risk, and the risk really intensifies as it crosses its peak. Another thing, just anecdotal evidence on how the economy is not so good and the banks are bracing for a storm. I had a commenter, Kevin, write me and say, I opened up a new bank account and I had to transfer over to BB&T, a fine bank. But he says, get a load of their commercial bank services agreement. Check out the date. This is July 20th, 2015. Of course, there it is. It's BB&T. July 20th, 2015. It's their commercial bank services agreement. And let me read you a couple of little quotes from it that he sent me. He said, here's one little area. We require prior notice for large cash withdrawals. Okay, that's fine. They don't really say how large. Is that 2,000, 4,000, 8,000, 10,000? We can refuse an order to withdraw funds or cash of an item or cash an item if we believe the request is a security risk or possesses a hardship for the bank. Well, let me get this straight. If you get your money out of the bank, you deposit it, it could be a security risk to the bank, or it could cause a hardship to the bank if they give you back your money. And let me put a little bit more focus on that. This is, again, in this BB&T, big regional bank in the Southeast. It's their commercial bank services agreement. Read along with me here. Your relationship with the bank is debtor-creditor. Let's pause on that right here. Your relationship with the bank is debtor. You're a creditor. You've given them your money when you deposit it. And opening an account does not create a fiduciary relationship between the bank and the depositor. Are you kidding me? The bank is coming right out and saying, hey, you are a creditor. Oh, incidentally, if we have any disagreements, we can debit the cost of those disagreements right out of your bank account. That's what it says in this agreement. I can't imagine that BB&T is the only bank with this kind of an agreement. But folks, it's coming. They're telling you straight out, listen, if we get into trouble, we're going to take your money. Your money is not your money if we get into trouble. And speaking of getting into trouble, Hillary Clinton, the email trouble, the debates were Jim Webb, former senator from Virginia, said they were rigged. Hillary Clinton got off easy. Bernie Sanders, we're tired of talking about your emails. Well, yeah, I'm sure you are, because what happened was criminal, and many criminal violations likely happened, in my humble opinion. But I got to tell you, I got to point something out for you. In 60 Minutes, Barack Obama came on to 60 Minutes and he said something to the effect of that, her email server scandal really didn't cause a national security threat. It didn't cause that at all. Now, the next day or two, Josh Earnest, the press secretary, came out and said, it didn't cause a threat for what we know now. And Earnest talked about the independent investigations of, people like the FBI, and that the president has a lot of respect for that. Now, let's take this in here for a minute. So the press secretary comes on television and says that his boss got it all wrong. His boss is basically an idiot, and really, that's just what we know now. Might have, maybe, we don't know. That's what we know now, that it didn't cause a national security risk. Really? So do you think that President didn't talk to Josh Earnest, his top media guy, before he went on 60 Minutes? Do you think that Josh Earnest and him sat down and said, okay, let's role play here a little bit, and they're going to ask you about Hillary Clinton's email server thing. What's your answer going to be? And I wonder if the president didn't say, let's see, I don't want to look like I'm, trying to do her in, because I've told you that I think Obama wants to crush her. They hate each other. So I'm going to pretend that, I don't think it's really, a national security issue. And then, like Monday or Tuesday, you come out and you contradict me. You come out and say, you walk that back for me. Do you think that Josh Earnest corrected his boss, the President of the United States, without President Obama being in on that? You think he just came up with that on his own? And would that be a great smokescreen to, I don't think Hillary Clinton's email scandal imperiled national security. And then Josh Earnest comes out and says, we don't think it does so far. And we respect the independent nature of the FBI, which, they're in the Obama administration. So I'm telling you, folks, and I've had a lot of people have a lot of pushback on me on this. That, there's no way Hillary Clinton will be indicted. No way at all. I say there's no way he lets her become president. There's no way. And she also, in all the polls, and this is a year out, and a lot can change in a year, but this is a year out, and she loses to almost every Republican. So are the Democrats going to want to run somebody who loses to all the Republicans? And they're probably saying, well, it's a year out, or more than a year out. So, listen. The gamesmanship behind the scenes, I thought Jim Webb was right. I thought he was the best guy in the Democratic field, Jim Webb, the former Virginia senator, and Bernie Sanders, total socialist, total, we're going to forcibly take money from this group of people and spread it out to everybody else. And of course, you see how well the Democratic policies work in places like, Chicago, which stopped paying their pensions this week. Baltimore, Detroit, California's in a financial mess. And so, I just have to say that there's a lot of gamesmanship going on and a lot of behind-the-scenes dealings. And I still don't think Hillary's going to be president of the United States for one reason or another. and I really strongly think she's going to be indicted. Listen, that's the way I see it. I'm Greg Hunter. Thank you for supporting USA Watchdog with your comments. I've got really smart people here. I had a couple of people post that Cuba thing talking about the Cuban troops going into Syria. Thank you for your donations. That helps us out. My favorite part, fear not. Prepare yourself physically, mentally, and above all, spiritually. Fear not. God is in charge. I'm Greg Hunter. Thank you for supporting the site.